Olasokomi Adenuga. Mr. Olasokomi is a solutions-focused executive with comprehensive background in strategic partnerships, learning, team leadership, qualifications and assessments, as well as curriculum development. He began his career with British Council Nigeria, where he rose to the position of the Deputy Country Manager. His experience spans stints in Africa, Latin America, South Asia, Middle East, to name just a few. He later moved on to Lagos Business School, where he had the responsibility for developing country and regional business expansion and the learning integration team. He subsequently led the Nigerian Business Development, the Nigerian Business Development team for the ACT Skills Nigeria, a GEMS educational company. Olasokomi is currently the Director of Learning and Development at Workforce Group and the Director of Digital Learning Africa Limited, where he is responsible for defining long-term strategic goals and the implementation of strategic learning and assessments, as well as translating talent development behaviors into impact learning curriculum, design and curriculum. It is our pleasure today to welcome Mr. Olasokomi, and the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much, Shay. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm actually absolutely delighted to be joining the team. Special thanks to the team that put this together. Great work you've done. And also thanks to the speakers who have spoken ahead of me. Last speaker was quite thought-provoking presentation. Many thanks to you. So just give me a moment while I share my screen. 1 second. Okay, I trust you can all see my screen. So today I'm going to be speaking about digital transformation, but I'll be, for the contemporary HR professional, I'll be putting a slight tilt on that, trying to move it a bit towards learning as well, so we can create a connection and see the value and benefits that HR transformation itself can have on learning, and also how learning serves as a pivot for transformation within organizations. I typically like to start presentations with a quote, and this one is an ancient Chinese phrase. It says, may you live in interesting times. And one thing we must all admit now is we are living in very interesting times. And also interesting times demand that we have responses that are quite dynamic. And I must say that HR itself is not insulated from this changes and the interesting times that we're in. If anyone had told us 6 months ago that we'll probably be having this session via digital platforms, we probably would have opted to converge at a location so that we could have better interaction. But here we are today, things have changed, and that's where we are, and that's how things are going to be for quite some time. So HR is not insulated, like I said. So in my opinion, HR has to be well positioned to help their organizations navigate disruptions that have taken place within our entire ecosystem. So one thing I know is that we're experiencing a rather rapid rate of change. And in my humble opinion, I'd say we can conclude that things are no longer going to be the same. The world, like our external environment, has changed completely. And even though we may find ourselves slowly adjusting to this, we must realize things are really never going to be the same as they were. And these changes have implications on nations, they have implications on organizations, on individuals, and of course, HR as well. So change is really constant. And that is one thing that I must say that is something we have to contend with. This, for instance, is an aerial view of the Ikoyi bridge linking Falomo. Many years ago, many of us will never have thought that this was possible. But here we are. These changes have happened, And as HR professionals, I think what we tend to do most of the time is we build systems and processes around data from the past, and we adopt a wait and see approach to see what the future really holds and how we respond to that. So where we are today, we don't have a heads up warning. No one is going to tell us what's around the corner. We can't effectively use data from the past to predict the future. So a lot of things really have to change. And the rate of change isn't going to slow down anytime soon. The reality is that competition is going to increase, and it's going to speed up over the next few years. That's one thing organizations and indeed individuals within the organizations have to contend with. So I would say that in this sort of situation, one of the most dangerous things for HR perhaps to continue to do is to maintain status quo. So for instance, if you end up doing the same thing the way you've always done, I believe will probably seal the fate of some organizations, because you have to be quite nimble to adapt to the external environment and make the necessary changes that the changes within the external environment, how you respond to them internally. HR must adapt them very quickly, and that's why we want to talk about digital transformation. Beyond HR adapting, individuals must also be quick to adapt. And in this period that we're in, where businesses are going through turmoil, individuals, some probably are changing roles, changing jobs, agility is something that is very critical to how we survive. HR must also be deliberate about adopting an outside-in view. So you need to look at the external environment and then determine what internal capabilities you need to build to respond to these external realities. And then lastly, you must be open to adopting technology across your entire value chain at a much faster rate. Things are changing very quickly. The agile organizations are the ones who are going to be ahead. And if we want to stay quick, if we want to survive, if we want to excel, it's about understanding where those technology interventions are required from a process and people perspective, and adopt them very quickly. So I've shown this image for a few people. It's a cartoon, really, and I'm sure some of you may have come across it. In the cartoon, digital transformation, you see, is it had been a fad, and it's something organizations have probably had thrown around internally. And of course, we all thought it was years away. But with the advent of COVID, organizations are now beginning to reinvent themselves. So the future, which we always used to look at, the future is already here. And it's either we pay attention or we just watch the transformation happen and then we get left behind. So in my experience, I've had some interaction with business executives and also HR leaders, and the loads of questions that they ask. And some of these questions cut across business, how they digitally transform, how they manage people performance, what changes they need to make internally to how they operate, what kind of regulatory frameworks will they need to work within, how they continue to innovate, and then what must they continue to do to ensure they succeed. And then what really bothers them the most is if they have the required capabilities internally to respond to these external realities. Ultimately, like a few speakers had said yesterday, business is about finance, business is about making money. So in this season of transformation, all the organization is thinking about is survival. They're thinking of their financial realities and how they cope. So HR needs to be plugged in and very aligned to that, and seeing how they can improve systems, improve processes to help the businesses survive during this dire period. So the question I ask is, how do HR leaders or professionals respond? It's by HR digital transformation. And digital transformation in itself, it's not about activities. HR digital transformation, from an HR perspective, is really about outcomes. Most of the time you find that in organizations, they set up a digital transformation team with a lot of activity going on, but clearly the outcomes and how they measure those outcomes haven't been clearly defined. And that's where they get stuck. So it becomes something they bandy around within the organization, and it really never results in anything. So if digital transformation is done right, it's like a caterpillar turned into a butterfly. So it takes flight quickly. So if it's done wrongly, all you do is have a very fast caterpillar, and that doesn't take you anywhere. So HR transformation really is the process of changing processes to become automated and data-driven. I would say the HR professionals really have dual responsibilities, because on the one hand, they're trying to transform processes. On the other hand, they also have a responsibility of transforming the workforce. Because beyond putting the systems and processes in place, there is a need to have an entire rearrangement of mental shelves. So there's going to be some level of culture change within the organization. So there's need to be a lot of people adapting to new ways of working, new systems, new processes. So it becomes a collective responsibility. And whether or not your transformation is digital or otherwise, it must have a clear objective in mind. I'll take you through some of this probably later in the presentation when I look at certain steps that you must follow. So just a second, I'm having a feed here. Sorry, just a second, my screen froze. I'll just share again. So, sorry, slight technical issues. Gremlins have crept in. Sorry, slight technicalities. Can everyone hear me, please?
Yes, we can.
My apologies. I'm just going to share the slide again.
Things happen. Tech. It's one of the things that we see with digital transformations.
Absolutely. And we get caught in it all the time. There. So, sorry about that. So I'll just bang through quickly. I think I've lost about a few seconds. So when we're looking at digital transformation, we need to look at the steps. And in looking at these steps, I'll take you. So first, I was talking about defining the goals. When you're defining the goals, you need to ask the critical questions, because HR needs to create and establish value for the transformation they're trying to achieve. Secondly, you determine who are the people who will implement the transformation. There are key stakeholders in any transformation process, and it's not just about titles. It's about defining the outcomes each one of these individuals needs to deliver. So line managers, HR professionals, everyone has objectives they have to deliver in this process. So thirdly, where you require additional help, by all means, ensure you get the additional help. So you determine if you do have the internal capabilities to drive this process, and where these capabilities are not within the organization, how do you begin to build them? Or if you need to get them externally to help drive your transformation process. So thirdly, you set milestones and define timeframes. Each milestone, each process has a milestone and must be given a sufficient amount of time for it to for you to see it come to fruition. So it's not something you rush through. You have to clearly define what needs to be done and when, and what are the outcome you will measure at that milestone to determine that you are on track and you're achieving some degree of success. Fifth process, identify processes to be phased out or digitized. We find that sometimes in organizations, the processes you find that really need to be replaced. And this really is built into your transformation process. So once you do a clear organizational audit, you know where your seeming bottlenecks are, and you determine what kind of systems or processes that you can put in place to ensure that these processes work better, or with digital technology, you are able to scale them better. The sixth point is ensure you engage your C-suite to invest in your plan. So making a business case for the C-suite is typically always a challenge. So whilst businesses are ready to increase, in some cases, their spend on digital transformation, if there isn't a clear connection made to how the transformation process is going to positively impact the business, chances are that those sign-offs may not be, you may not secure some of those sign-offs. A seventh point is make sure you get everyone on board. What's your stakeholder engagement plan? A change in HR process or organizational process really means that everyone needs to get on board. And you have to find ways to socialize and get collective buy-in across various functions and get volunteers into that process. So there is a degree of ownership as well from other players across the organization. Eighth, evaluate always. When you want to implement digital technologies, it's really great because sometimes organizations do the bit of just implementing the technology. You have to always track the results as well. It's not about just launching a shiny new process or a shiny new optimization process, but you have to track how is it possibly impacting the organization and what are the results you can see within the organization. Lastly, you make it a culture. The essence of HR digital transformation lies in creating cultural digitization. This involves not just learning how to use automated solutions, but learning how to use them so that they enhance human capabilities within the organization. So these are some steps, but largely I would say what really is the difference that will make the difference. We're in a situation now where everyone is, a lot of organizations and HR professionals really are talking about HR transformation, but what really is going to make the difference is learning and rapid learning at that. So without a doubt, the ability to unlearn old ways of doing things and learn specific new, particularly context relevant, because organizational contexts have changed. Some business models have evolved into something else. Some organizations have decided to pivot based on the realities of COVID-19. So what new skills, what new capabilities are you building that would help the business thrive and survive? So new learning is critical, and learning the right way to make sure that you make forward progress is even more crucial than ever. I was looking at a survey recently, and I saw that a number of organizations have had their learning disrupted. And we know this is what COVID has done. So COVID has affected the way we work, the way we learn in very unprecedented ways. And this stats just represents the kind of impact COVID has had on organizations. And it has informed a lot of them now beginning to evolve digitally. So as our new normal continues to sink in within the days, the weeks, and the months ahead, we have to keep learning going for our employees. And that is where HR plugs in that digital learning into their transformation agenda. There are models you can look at in terms of where you're digitalizing your processes or digitalizing learning to support people, developing people capabilities within the organization. So amidst the disruptions,
put this one in the freezer.
We can look at content delivery.
Soup.
Apologies, sir. Please continue.
Not a problem. So within these disruptions, we have to look at elements like content delivery. What are the kind of learning resources that can be used from a digital perspective? Interactive lessons, videos, simulations, job aids. We also must continue to drive e-tutoring and coaching as well. Be able to provide support to our staff during this transformation period. We're seeing an increased rise also in collaborative and social learning. So organizations need to deliberately set out platforms to create chat rooms, groups where participants can share learning on social platforms. And of course, creating virtual classrooms. I think that's the new thing now. Virtual classrooms have existed for quite a while, but a number of organizations and individuals are tilting more in that direction now, where you're looking at you're looking at synchronous virtual learning sessions taking place to develop staff amidst this disruption that we have. So, sorry. Oh, I'm having a tech moment again.
Can we round up?
Yes, I'm almost done, please. I just have a couple of slides and I'll be done. I'll just go through them without my apologies. So I just want to take you lastly through steps of how the learning function can respond. So working with SMEs to confront internal and external realities. Step 2 is looking at identifying the implications of the new realities. Also, you need to look at designing learning solutions that can accelerate progress within the organization. Effectively transform your learning function into a digital function. Adopt appropriate technologies and processes. And whilst you are implementing this, make sure that you execute, you review most of the time, correct where necessary, and celebrate success where you have to. So implementation requires strategic execution, and really poor execution. It's 70% of strategic failure is really from poor execution. So ideas are good, but if you're not executing properly, that could be the dump. So 4 guiding principles to HR transformation is understanding why you do it. What does the business want from this? Secondly, you take into cognizance what you want to deliver. It is not activity, it's about outcomes. Thirdly, it's important to understand how you do it. Who are the people who are going to, what are the processes, what are the systems that you're going to put in place to ensure that it is done? And lastly, who does it? understand who are the people who have the responsibility for driving the HR transformation agenda within the organization. Because digital transformation is a shared agenda and is not sole responsibility. Typically, this is an organogram that organizations have when they want to implement digital transformation. So they had all the fancy positions that are put in place, and people occupy those positions. But when it comes to measuring outcomes, that's the manager who determines what business results are being achieved from the transformation. That is typically where you find vacant, and no one is holding that. So please understand that when the rate of change, as Jack Welch said, outside exceeds the rate of change inside, the end really is in sight. And that is some guiding thought that all we as HR practitioners must have and must continue to abide with. So my parting thoughts, these are questions that I would like you to ponder over is, one, how you will leverage learning to respond to the realities that you confront. What is going to be your digital competitive advantage? What are the capabilities you require to succeed? Does your HR transformation agenda, will it align with your business strategy? What digital models are required? And then HR itself needs to develop the level of discipline to confront the brutal realities of the external factors that they face. And lastly, is HR transformation agenda activity focused or outcome focused? So those are the clear things that need to be defined when you start trying to implement HR strategy. And these questions really will guide you in implementing a fail-safe transformation agenda. So that's it from me. Those are my slides. I'll have any questions. I'll be able to take any questions if you have any.
Okay, thank you so much, sir, for such an insightful session. And it's interesting how your last thought really ties into what Bolaji Olagunju had mentioned yesterday as to is HR, driving activity, or we are outcome focused. And so this keeps, coming up like a recurring theme across most of the speakers.
Yes.
So we'll just quickly take one question because of time. We really run out of time. So I have a question here, and it's in the process of creating digital transformation in an organization, is it necessary to communicate to all employees? And what duration is appropriate to implement this process?
Oh, most definitely. It's important to communicate that. Like I mentioned earlier, HR transformation is not necessarily solely HR's responsibility. It's a collective responsibility, and that needs to have, there will be a collection of stakeholders across the organization. So communication across the entire organization, because there are going to be changes in behavior, changes in practices, changes in processes. Then they need to that needs to be communicated. With regards to duration of a transformation will be definitely organization specific. Now, the larger your organization, probably the longer it will take for you to implement. So one thing I would advise is that you start small. So you could take an element of the business and try to implement that. So that will be other phases that you want to implement. So there isn't a fixed period for a transformation process within an organization. Clearly, you have to get collective buy-in from everyone. And then you have to have organizational champions who are also driving this transformation agenda.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Olasukome. That was like a really explosive session on digital transformation. A lot of people have asked for the slides. I'm sure I like the guide that you've also put there, that they can access the guide.
Okay, I am happy to share the slides. And also to support the network, because I know there are quite a number of established and aspiring HR professionals here. I will be offering anyone who's on this session I've got programs on digital transformation, on any other program that is a virtual instructor-led session, we would offer you places on the session. So if you send a mail to hello@Digital Learning Africa, with that code, we'll offer the first 20 people by close of business tomorrow.
Okay, thank you so much.
So I'll offer 80% discount on those sessions.
That has been, a really good giveaways. We've got so much giveaways in this Learning Summit. Thank you so much for adding this to the giveaways that we have.
My pleasure. My pleasure.